Hey, everybody.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. We are on YouTube.
Yes, thank you. I was,
Okay, great. So I see we have Larry and Mark and me, and that's enough for me to move to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to make a few remarks, but first, just for efficiency, I move to approve the minutes as submitted beforehand. The minutes from last meeting, I should say. Can I have a second?
I will second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Mark, are you in favor? You're on mute. He gave the thumbs up. Okay, great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, well, I will start. I know John is going to be late because he is speaking about the tree ordinance on a different webinar. But I will just kick things off by saying welcome to everybody and welcome to the members of the Louisboro community who are us on YouTube. And thank you very much for joining us. This is the first meeting that we're streaming live to the public. To date, our steering committee meetings really have focused on our getting to know each other, our getting organized, and our getting educated on the comprehensive planning process. So the agendas and the minutes from those meetings are up on our website. It's the town website, and you will find us under committees and councils. Please keep an eye on that webpage. That will be where you can find up-to-date info about our meetings and about the work that we are getting up to. And I also want to thank my fellow committee members. This is a volunteer process, and we've all committed our time for multiple years. As we know, this will be going on well past the 1 year mark, maybe even the 2 year mark. So I know we've already been working hard, and thank you for that. And thank you again to the members of the public in advance for your participation. We're really excited. So a few general notes on what we've learned so far as a committee. As you will hear tonight during our discussion of the project timeline, we know that this is very much a marathon, not a sprint. And as you will hear in our discussion of our mission statement, we understand that our role is really to be facilitators of building the comprehensive plan. Our role is to gather feedback and input from our town and then synthesize it in as fair and objective a fashion as possible. And to that end, especially the point about being objective, we will be recommending the hire of an independent consultant. We think it will be really helpful in guiding the process and lending expertise in the process. So you'll hear us discuss that tonight more with regards to project scope. So with that, I would like to kick off our first topic, the preliminary project timeline. And could someone just ping Charlene? If you have an extra screen to spare, just shoot her a quick email and make sure that she has the login. I know John is definitely going to be joining us late. Okay, excellent. So, project timeline. So you'll all remember that we discussed the project timeline at the last meeting. There's actually been a lot of back and forth over email on the project timeline since then. We've revised it, we've filled in the gaps, and that's all based on some firsthand experience from some of the committee members in going through this process before. And then it's also based on research done on best practices, so how the process has worked for other towns and for award-winning plans that we've found from the American Planning Association and other sources. Another note, this is really only one version of what a timeline could actually end up looking like. It'll definitely be dynamic, and we will have to be flexible and change as we go. But really, I just want to focus on the first 6 months. And we talked about this a lot at the last meeting, but I just want to circle back to that. I'm going to share my screen so we can see it. Okay, great. Is that big enough for everybody? How's it looking? Good. Okay. So first 6 months, and some of this we've already been working on. We've definitely been working on our setup and project management discussions. We've assembled and reviewed existing data and the Louisboro comprehensive plans. We're in the process of gathering expertise from the county, town, and outside experts. Last time we agreed that we wanted to target an informational meeting to the public, sort of a get to know the steering committee, welcome, this is what we've been up to, this is what we're planning to get up to. So we're looking at June for that. I threw out I'll wait till Charlene and John are here, but I threw out the date of June 7th, possibly. And then educational webinars for us and for the public that we can all take part in together. Those, not sure how frequently those would be, but ideally we would like to have them as an ongoing series that people could join. And then at the same time, gathering preliminary feedback, and a survey is an awesome way to do that. And I know there's been some really good research behind the scenes to get, the idea of what could be in the survey and how that would work. So that will be a really important milestone for us. And then presenting to the town for input in July. And that happens to work out because we committed to quarterly updates, which would be nicely situated in July. And a survey is an awesome way to do that. And I know there's been some really good research behind the scenes to get, the idea of what could be in the survey and how that would work. So that will be a really important milestone for us. I'm hearing some feedback. I'm hearing my voice repeated back to me, a little delay. Okay, that's better. Okay, I think that might have been Charlene, potentially, if somebody has YouTube open at the same time as the Zoom.
Yeah, I think Charlene's joining us momentarily, I think. We're just texting each other right now.
Okay.
Hey, Charlene's on.
You're on.
Charlene's on.
Oh, good. Okay.
Charlene's with us.
There she is.
That's better. I don't hear it now, so I'll just keep going. And then simultaneously, we would be, I don't want to change that. Pardon me. I meant to highlight. I won't get too fancy. I'll use my mouse. We want to be identifying the issues and areas of potential focus, i.e. scope for the RFP, which we are talking about tonight. And then the goal for the 6-month mark would be to actually draft and issue the RFP to consultants, and then get some responses back around October, November. So I'm just going to pause there because I know that was a lot, but just thinking about the next 6 months and setting out as what we want to accomplish, really the milestones being informational meeting to the public, presenting to the town board, drafting the RFP, issuing survey, and then getting the RFP out the door. Does anyone from the committee want to comment?
I think that's a good overview. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Like I said, there was a lot of back and forth behind the scenes on this. So not hearing any specific, and let me just make sure I don't run over time on here. Okay, good. So now that Charlene's on, Does anybody have any conflicts with June 7th, which is a Tuesday? We could do our normal Tuesday at 7:30 for the informational meeting to the public. No conflicts. Okay, great. So we'll ask John about that as well later on, but we can preliminary put that as a placeholder.
Katie, should it be June 8th? You said a Tuesday, right?
Oh, did I get that wrong? Whatever that Tuesday is in.
That would be Tuesday, June 8th.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, that, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll put that as a placeholder. So moving on down the timeline further, there's this very big sort of disclaimer here. And I'll just say again that, you know, this is all very dynamic and can change as we go. Obviously, one thing that would really change the timeline a lot is how quickly we get back responses from consultants, how many responses we get, how long it takes us to interview them. So I have this big disclaimer here that from this point forward, any or all of the timeline really would need to be just adjusted based on consultant time, their availability. They might need to start the project in sort of a delayed fashion to fit into their workflow. So really, these are just our best guesses in terms of when tasks would be happening and how quickly, but it does give us sort of at least a framework to operate in to start, and shows sort of September 2022 being the goal of when we would have the process finished, but you know, it could extend further based on a lot of different moving pieces. Another thing to highlight is just how often and how frequent we will be getting feedback from the public. Again, because we see our role really as facilitators and we want to facilitate input from the public in a fair and really accessible fashion. You know, the line items on here that we have so far would be informational meetings to the public happening here in June as first, the educational webinars, a survey, and then just going down the line. So this kickoff envisioning meeting with the public, we've seen over and over from looking at other comprehensive planning practices that this is usually sort of the starting point where the steering committee interfaces and gets feedback to start. So we really kind of crafted this to make sure that we're touching base with the public and starting to get input really well before that. But that would be the first meeting that the consultant is on board for and is facilitating, and they're really pros at doing that. So that seems like it would be late in the process, but you know, we've built in a lot of engagement beforehand. And then after that, we would move into stakeholder interviews, and then a series of really targeted engagement outreach programs, online, in person. And we'll have to get really creative to make sure that we hear all voices. You know, pop-ups, you just stop and talk to us for a little bit, stop and talk to subcommittees. When you're at the grocery store, you know, hopefully by then we'll be out of pandemic and we can be back to a little bit more of normalcy. And then you know, the public will also be involved with subcommittees, and we have ongoing subcommittee meetings happening here. Public meetings to discuss the draft, and then hearings in terms of adoption of the final comprehensive plan. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts or places just where they see gaps, standing out to them right now.
Yeah, Katie, if you don't mind, I think we should just discuss for a few minutes amongst the group the forming of subcommittees, because I know we've all been approached by members of the community about engagement in the subcommittees and engagement in the process.
Mhm.
And I think it's worth just discussing the pros and cons about when to form those subcommittees.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
Personally, I think that we need to get some more information from the public at large
Mhm.
as far as what the major what residents and stakeholders in the community feel are the issues before like a big effort is made to form subcommittees and start discussing specific issues. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that other members of the committee are have the same viewpoint, or if they have differing viewpoints, I think it's worth just hearing them.
Great. Charlene, can I throw that to you first?
Yeah, I was going to answer that. Larry, that's a really very, very good point. It's an excellent point, actually. I think what we have to do before we get into the subcommittees is sort of get a general idea of what the scope of the RFP is going to be. And once we do that, get the consultants on board and talk about how we go forward with a general idea of where we're going. And then we just open it up, because we're just recipients of a lot of information. And then we will then consolidate it and, put it into some kind of, with the consultants, obviously, into some kind of order and come out with a draft. So at first, we have to do our job, and that's the RFP, then go into the other issues of subcommittee so that everybody gets their say, everybody gets their input. And in fact, even the things that we have to do for communications, that should be discussed with the consultants, because I don't know, they know more than I do as to how to get to the public and the best ways of getting to the public. So that would be something that we would ask them. And I think the public really has to know that we're not doing anything here other than getting a scoping, getting those areas, those goals, mission statements, the goals of what we think is important. And we're going to get their input on that, but it's going to be a very, very general idea. It's not going to be formulated into any kind of recommendations until the consultants come on and we get their input.
Yeah, I would like to add that I think it's a really good idea to do general survey as soon as possible. But we don't want to get too specific and start hearing specific feedback before the consultants are on board, because they're the experts. They will be able to hear that and synthesize it in a way that we're just not capable of. And they'll be able to guide us on the best way to solicit that input and then gather it up and actually make it useful. So I think it would be great for us to start gathering some raw data that then we can share with the consultants once they come on board. But I don't want to get too far along in that process and sort of step on the consultants' toes.
Katie, one more thing. I know I'm the liaison to the planning board.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's been my experience that the planning board has been very involved, not just with the liaison, but members of the planning board have been very involved in it, because they know they've implemented the 1985 plan, and they know what's happening, and they know what sort of is needed or may be needed, or what the gaps are. So I think that their involvement would be very important, as with the consultants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And we're glad that you are on the planning board as well. and that'll help us.
Yeah, but I have no history. Yeah.
Good point. You'll make sure we keep everyone in the loop.
Yes.
Any other comments from, I can't tell if John is joining us yet. Larry or Mark, do you have any other comments on that topic?
No, I think you covered it well.
That was a great question, Larry. Do you have any follow-up thoughts, or do you kind of?
No, I just wanted to make sure everybody had an opportunity to discuss. And that might be a good idea that Charlene brought up, that maybe maybe the first step is some sort of communication with the planning board and the other town officials and appointed and elected to understand what they perceive as the issues that should be addressed.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'll just add here, other town officials. Okay, great. So my next question is, do we feel comfortable, and this is available on our Google Drive, so we can continue to workshop this, and it can be a living and breathing document, but does everyone feel comfortable adopting this version? And I can mark this up at the top to make it obvious that this is the version that we will work with going forward as our timeline.
Yes, with the proviso that the dates may be off a little bit.
Right. You're good with that, Larry and Mark?
Yeah, I just want to make it really clear that after that November date on this timeline, that those dates are very, very much subject to change, as you noted.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, fabulous. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. And we agree we're working with June 8th here. I'll just mark that down. Okay, great. So any final thoughts on the timeline before I move to the next topic? Okay.
Nope.
Hearing none. So our next topic is potential project scope. And we've mentioned this in passing a few times. We need to draft an RFP for the consultants. And the goal with the RFP, and I don't know if this analogy works, but I'm going to throw it out there as sort of thinking of it like a menu at a restaurant, that I think our goal is to be as broad as possible. So when they respond, they can indicate how much they would charge for each piece, as opposed to how much they would charge for the entire meal. That way we can, pick and choose based on budgeting and based on priorities, what we would like to, and I say we, as obviously this is not us deciding as the committee solely, but what we would like to partner with the various other town officials and other interested parties, figure out what do we want to hire the consultant for, and what can we afford to hire the consultant for. So we will definitely be able to add to and adjust the RFP in the coming months as we start getting some preliminary feedback back from the survey. But really the goal is just to be broad, cover as many topics as possible, and get a sense for the expertise of the consultants that are responding. Now, Charlene has volunteered to take the lead on drafting the RFP, and I know we all agree that she has the experience having done it before. She will pull us all into the process as needed, but I wanted to kick off the discussion by asking Charlene, what do you need from the other committee members to start that process?
Well, I'm gonna have to consult with a lot of people such as Jan and also our consultants, because I need a background as what this town is, the history of it. A lot I can get from the website, so that's not really that much. And then, I mean, what I need from all of us is, where do we want to go? We're going to discuss the goals that that John was so nicely put together. So we're going to discuss those goals, and that would be the most important thing, because you can then build around that. A lot of it is going to be, okay, what are your qualifications? What else have you done? What would you charge for that? Who was on your team? Blah, blah, blah. So that's going to be pretty much rote. What really is the meat of it, even though it's broad, are the goals that we want. And also then getting into the specifics as, do you want a land use survey such that, you know, what every piece of property is being used for? Do we need that? So the particulars will be in that too, but they will be pricing issues, not necessarily what our vision is.
Got it. Hi, John, welcome. Oh, you're on mute.
I figured since I'm coming from the tree meeting, I'd be, have trees in the background.
Very nice.
Excellent. We just started talking about scope, and Charlene will be taking the lead on drafting the RFP. But if I heard you correctly, Charlene, what you need from the rest of the committee members to help you is perhaps you can pull us in and delegate some of the background gathering, you know, what has been implemented since the last plan, what hasn't, history of the town and things like that. But then in terms of sort of topic areas, goals, but I use that, I kind of would put that word in air quotes, is really, it's just a topic area to explore.
Right.
We won't be able to actually set a goal until the consultant is on board and we're getting the community feedback.
It also would be very good to have the survey done.
Yeah, we definitely will.
Yeah.
Let me share this great document that we have going. Okay, can everybody see that? It says Louisboro 1985 at the top.
No.
I have a blank screen.
Oh, okay, let me try it again. How's that?
Here we go. Yep.
Okay, great. So let's see, I have on the agenda that we will be talking about this for the next 12 minutes. So we're definitely not going to solve it tonight, and that's totally okay. But just to give everyone a tour of what we've assembled so far. So again, there's been a lot of back and forth on this between meetings, which has been great. We've got the outline of the 1985 plan up top. And then we move into other communities, and some of these just are by proximity. In terms of location, some of these were recommended specifically to us from the county as being examples of plans that we really should look at because they're similar to our town or exemplary in some way. So there's North Salem, and basically we've just broken it down in terms of bullet points, in terms of what is in the plan and different topics. So really they're just sort of subject areas. We're not going into detail about what the specific objectives and goals were under each bullet point. And there's a lot on here. So I think this is a great starting point. But again, we're not going to accomplish the task of pulling out what we think is relevant in the next 10 minutes. So looking at this, Charlene, what do you think is a good next step in terms of pulling from this and starting just to throw some stuff at the wall in terms of what should be in the RFP?
Well, I think the best thing that we could do first and discuss tonight, because I think we can get that done, is to see if we like the survey in the format that's been presented, and how and where can we distribute it? Because that's something that if we get out really fast, we can get a lot of answers back. It's a very general, I thought it was great. It was a very general survey, but it really gets to the meat that what people are thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And not exactly what we may be doing, but we'll know what people are thinking. For this, you know, I'm sort of not into reinventing the wheel. I think the 1985 was a good outline of things and it gives you a good handle. I think there are some things that should be added, and and some things that should be deleted. And also, now that I think of it, I think we have to think about climate smart. My understanding is that we're not a climate smart community, or we have a very low rating on it. And that's something we really should think about. And maybe if we look at it in the master plan, it can give us some indications. We can talk to a consultant of why it would be good for us.
Mm-hmm.
Just to add on to that, I think Charlene, the Climate Smart, I think is a national program, and Louisboro is also within certain watersheds. So both Climate Smart and the location in the watersheds may also provide some opportunities for funding down the road.
Exactly.
So we should, where funding is available, I think we should at least explore those subjects within.
Yeah, I think we're a bronze, and that's what my understanding is. But if we are, then I think we should address it in the master plan and hope to be a silver at one point or another, at least.
John, just want to pick your brain on the same question, especially since you've been doing a lot of work on this gathering up of information.
Well, I mean, 1985 had a very specific set of goals, which are not all of which are relevant today because, well, for one thing, the land has been used. But I think we have to, and I think the survey is a good idea. I didn't get a chance. I don't know whether you talked about it in the first part of the meeting, but haven't had a chance to look at it. But the survey, I think, is very important input because it'll get us, assuming we get a broad distribution, will give us a sense of what people in town are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we have to take a hard look at the scope in terms of today's environment. And I think we have to have a little crystal ball because I think the next 5 years to 10 years are going to possibly be different. And I don't think we're going to be doing a master plan every couple of years. History says about every 25. So I think we have to anticipate new things that I think are going to be important to the town. And so that's kind of my view. And that's one of the reasons I put that list together, because there was a lot of, the different towns had a lot of different views. Some of them are similar to ours, some are very different. It just gives us a look at what other, a range of other things we could think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Mark, any specific comments?
Yeah, so I'm interested in looking at the other communities suggested in town, and then getting some samples of contemporary master plans so that we can use more current issues to inform our scope and RFP, climate smart, infrastructure, land use technologies, things that weren't prevalent 20 years ago.
Definitely.
So communication is, those sorts of infrastructure items.
Right. Great, thank you. Larry?
There's a placeholder in this outline for the Louisboro 1999 review.
Right.
And there were a lot of recommendations in 1999, which was 14 or 15 years after the 85 plan. And a lot of those recommendations, it seems like, or some of them at least, were implemented. And I think Kirsten has started making an effort to do some research and to try to help us understand which other parts of the 1999 review were also implemented. So I think that would be good to understand,
Definitely.
and to do a further review of those and see which ones are still may still be valid concerns if they haven't been addressed, or maybe that's something that would be addressed with the public participation with a consultant's help later on. But definitely getting still in the data gathering stage is, I guess what I'm saying is we still are gathering some information.
Definitely. Kirsten, do you need help from us on, or do you want to pull in any committee members to help you? That sounds like that might be a lot of digging around to find answers to those kinds of questions.
And it's institutional history. So I was going to tap John and Jan to some slow day, have a good read of the 1999 recommendations. I quickly was able to put together a list for Larry, what has been implemented, if they could see if I was missing any items, and then gather a second list, what didn't happen in the intervening years.
Was Ed Burrows involved with the 1999?
I don't think so.
I'm not sure.
I remember him saying he was not, but I don't.
Yeah, I'll talk to him.
Okay. Well, this is all really great. As acknowledged up front, this will not be solved tonight, and nor will getting into the nitty gritty of the survey content. We'll save that for a different meeting. But I think the really good news is that we have some really good overall research. We've been putting in the hours and doing the homework behind the scenes to have a really good jumping off point. So I think we'll move on to the next topic shortly, but for now, I think we have a few good action items on how to further along, and certainly in drafting the RFP, if you would like to delegate certain, history or background or formatting or anything like that, just to sort of get us started, Charlene, feel free to do that over email.
Thank you.
Okay, great. It'll be good to get a few extra minutes on the next topic, which is our mission statement. So the thinking behind this is purely our mission as the steering committee. So I think it would be really wonderful. I know we've talked about this a little bit back and forth, just to have a very couple sentences that we can post on our page of the town website that just make it clear what our mission as a committee is in this comprehensive planning process. So just as an example and a jumping off point for discussion, we have this on the agenda for the next 20 minutes. Couple sentences. Engage the Louisboro community in order to envision the future of our town and capture this vision in an updated comprehensive plan. Ensure fair and equal opportunities for all members of the community to provide input throughout the multi-year process. Purely jumping off point for discussion. Maybe do we want to go around and just each give preliminary thoughts for a few minutes? Does that sound good?
Yeah,
You want to go first, Charlene?
sure. That's a great intro. It's a great intro because that's what one wants a community to be. I would sort of add preservation aspect to it, preservation of the character, the preservation of our natural resources, the preservation of our historical landmarks. Because I think that's very important. I know I moved up here because of the character of Cross River. I liked it when I first moved in, and now I love it. And I would not want to change that into a Katona, let's say, who has that, and that's not saying anything bad about Katona, but it's just saying that I like what we have here in Louisboro.
Okay,
That's it.
cool. John?
I would add something about assessing the impact of our changing environment.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, anything else?
No, I think the rest of it captures it pretty well.
Okay, great. Mark?
I think future ready is sort of as a concept, to make sure that we're planning and implementing infrastructure that will keep the value of the community and make it still current and relevant, so that it could support work from home, changing demographics, climate and ecology, so that we can be responsive to change. And I think what the concept of planning, sort of master planning, broad brush, aspirational concepts, I'd like to think about how we can focus on making them actionable and trying to impute some framework or deadlines, schedules for implementing things, so that we don't just end up with the concept of bike lanes or decarbonization or intermodal transportation, but sort of have a framework of within the next 5 years or 10 years or whatever the triggers are, but so that there's something that the town agencies can look back on and say, we've got to start to commit a certain resource or revenue to meet these deadlines, so that they're not sort of open-ended. I don't yet know how that how that's going to happen tactically yet, but I would like, so that we can look at we develop a master plan that has some sort of relevant timelines, or sort of not just the aspiration, but an actionable plan with a schedule, if you will.
Okay, great. Larry?
I don't have really too much to add. I think this is all really good, but and I don't know if this belongs in a mission statement, but maybe in the rough ideas, at least for now, a recognition that things have changed since the last plan was prepared.
Okay.
And those things are, Louisboro has changed. Those sort of.
Charlene, you had something to add to the schedule?
I did put in something. I just want to address what Mark said. We have to tread very carefully on framework for priorities, because it's going somewhat outside our purview as a recommending body to the town board, because what you're talking about are more town board issues. We have to deal, and we can do some of it through what we're dealing with land use, because that's really our that's where we're going with this. So to look at timelines and even state them for the town board would be a bit overreaching.
But to Mark's point, I think one of the things, and I agree with you, Shirley, we can't dictate the town board's actions. But one of the places we can have impact is there's a whole bunch of committees. And I think we could probably change the mission statement of some of these committees using the master plan.
Say that again?
There's a whole bunch of different committees in the town, and they cover most of what we want to do, but we may change their mission statements or their aim a little bit by the master plan and get some of the implementation going by that method.
Well, I think you can do that by, stating the goals when we do the master plan, because that really then dictates what committees would be looking at.
Well, I may give you an example. So we have an antenna committee that basically looks at cell phones and cell towers, but we really should broaden that committee out to other forms of communication. That's an example of the kind of thing I'm thinking about.
I think that would be a recommendation, because again, that's within the town board issues. It's not something that is really a master plan. Ours is really a broad base. What do we do with the land?
Well, I'll jump in.
I think it's broader than land. I don't think it's just land. I think
Or infrastructure or anything having to do with the land.
I just see it as a way that doesn't force the town board to take any action, but it does get the ideas kind of in there with some life, to Mark's point.
Yeah, I hear what you're both saying. And one thing I've seen in other plans is it's almost more about communication, that all these plans make recommendations. For example, change the committee, the antenna committee, to also look at other forms of technology. But then how they communicate the recommendations, some of them have really nice frameworks. And really, by framework, I just mean chart. At the end, they have all of their recommendations listed. They say what type of recommendation it is, i.e., is it a planning board? Is it a town board? Is it a committee? And then they say suggested priority, urgent, medium, long-term. And then they list potential tools for implementation, grants or private foundations, or, they list possible ways that would help get funding or get resources. So I think to the point of making the plan actionable, we want it to be organized in such a way that it clearly communicates recommendations in a way that the town board or whoever is implementing them can actually say, okay, this one's urgent, we should start with that. This one's for longer term, kind of give them some organization to work off of.
Katie,
I think that's an excellent approach. I mean, if you leave it too high level, the chances of implementation are minimized. If you give them action, very basic actionable statements, without forcing them to do it, but you give them recommendations that are actionable, I think you have a much more likely that something will happen. And I think that's what Mark was trying to get at.
I think that's a great idea, and we can put that in the RFP, asking for recommendations based on what our goals are. That is going to be extra added money, of course. But I think that what we're doing here, remember that when we have the master plan, everything that is done in the planning board, everything that's done in Louisboro must conform with the master plan.
Mm-hmm.
So we are doing that by virtue of the fact of recommending this. And if it's taken by the town board and passed as law, as passed as a comprehensive plan, the planning board must look at the master plan and see if in fact this, whatever they're doing, is is in accordance with it. And if it's not, then there has to be some other actions. So it does have a lot of weight, even if we don't recommend everything or, give timetables.
Yeah, but I mean, some of the items are going to be, the planning board is one thing because the planning board is based in law, probably as much as any board in town. But some of the things are simply going to be directions we would like the town board to take or review or consider that maybe they're not doing today. And that also could be in the committees, and that's not quite as, versed in law, but it's something I think we need to propose.
Yes, and then they could accept it or reject it.
Yeah,
So I think if you take just an example, like an aspiration having to do with climate change, we don't want to sort of like, yeah, maybe we should decarbonize kind of someday. It's an imperative, right? So when Bedford established their climate program, I think it was called Bedford 2020. It's like two words, right? Bedford 2020 or Bedford 2030. And the 2030 or the 2020 was it had to be done by then, or make best efforts to be done by then. So I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know how it exactly will apply to this, but.
We could recommend anything, and remember that the last word is by the town board.
Right. So one thing I just want to ask the group, in thinking about the mission statement, we sort of there are two categories of what we've talked about so far. So in the one sense, because we're facilitators, and what ends up being recommended and prioritized in the master plan will come out of what the community says, what the community presents. Part of our mission is really just to solicit that feedback. But then I'm also hearing, and some of the rough ideas that were already listed and we threw on there tonight are more sort of steering the master plan to have certain content. I'm purely thinking out loud. I'm probably not even saying this correctly. I guess what I'm asking is our mission statement just purely to gather up the feedback? Or are there, like, these two sentences sort of capture that, but then are we missing sentences after that would say, we want to make sure that we make space to discuss climate, social equity, future.
Well, I think you have to be a little bit careful. I think you want a very general statement that approaches so you've got an input statement, and then you want to have a statement that goes to actions, I think, or not actions, but necessarily what's the next step. Before we establish goals, though, you got to be careful you don't let your goals creep into your mission statement.
I agree with that.
I agree too. I was hoping that would be the case, because it feels like those two things are disjointed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in mission statement, we're starting out, we don't know our goals yet.
Exactly. Because yeah, I'll just highlight kind of from this point forward in our list here.
Do you think we can evolve in a fiscally, ecologically, and socially sustainable fashion? I think is a good statement. I think that's a general statement. It's not, it doesn't give goals.
Yeah, I think that's what the kind of statement we want to have is something.
Yeah, because that seems what I would envision a master plan doing.
Yeah, I think that maybe this one too, I'm just sort of moving up to the top of the list. I think a couple of these sort of have goals baked into them and therefore need to get kicked out.
Yeah, I think we want to address the changing environment or the future ready, the marketing, that I think needs to be in there. Again, those are general enough that they're not goals, so.
Yeah, I think these two are too specific.
Right.
In terms of the end goals, which we don't know yet.
Well, I would not, I'm not sure we want the suggested tools for implementation, the actual, I guess so. It's okay.
Well, that's pretty specific.
Yeah, that is. I mean, we can ask for it in our RFP. Because if we put it out now and that's our mission, then we'll have to do it and we may not be able to afford to do it.
Yeah, well, our mission could change over time too, so.
Yeah.
Mhm. It looks like these bullet points all have in common the idea of considering an ever-evolving future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's kind of key to today's master plan, a little different than 1985, I think.
right. So
Whereas,
maybe something, maybe another, the last sentence involves evolution. Another E. We can let that. Well, we still have 4 minutes on this topic, so.
well, 1985 was all about land, because if you look back at the environment of what was going on at that time, that was the consideration of how do you keep Louisboro the way it is, or does it change? And commercial growth, all of that's a different environment today. So,
Well, we also have to get input from everyone else and see what they think in the survey. And it may be that you want all that, but preserve what things that, there's some things I'm sure people like. So we have to really, before we.
Right, evolution implies everything will change when
Yeah.
really we're not suggesting that at all.
No, yeah, and I think that would be not fair. That would give a go.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's let this marinate. We don't need to decide on the
Yeah.
mission statement tonight, but we're getting closer. And I think does everyone feel good about the first 2 sentences?
Yes.
yeah, that's a good.
Okay. I move to solidify those first 2 sentences. We could certainly put those on our website this week as a placeholder. And then we can always add another sentence or 2 to them in the coming weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Discussion, does that feel too rushed?
No.
Nope.
Oh, it
No.
does. Okay. I'm
It's
sorry.
not cast in concrete, so if we see changes, we'll change it.
Okay, can I get a second?
I second.
All in favor?
I.
Aye. Okay, great. Then we will pop that on the website this week and it'll make it seem a little bit more of a living and breathing thing. Awesome. Okay, next on the agenda, we have time for town board liaisons to comment. So I'm gonna pass the floor to Jane, who is with us. And I know we've talked about a lot of stuff up till now. So any comments or thoughts from you, or we can also just kind of have a Q&A session as we've had in the past. Defer to whatever feels good for you, Jane.
Thank you, Katie. I really appreciate it. And the mission statement, I don't want to step on any toes here, but I maybe making recommendations could be part of the mission statement. I'm not sure if I'm that could be a nice part of the mission statement, to make recommendations to the town board after having solicited all this information. But so I really just want to say thank you. And as I sit here and I've gone to most of the previous meetings here, I'm really impressed with how far the group has come. I checked my email today and I was able to read through all the materials that we went through tonight, but I was so pleased, and it came together so nicely. The timeline makes sense, and it makes sense that it will change based on the consultant, and then, but now we can just tab it over, kind of, right? If it takes a little while to get a consultant, we can just kind of tab it over. So that's really appreciated. And then I'm appreciating the multi-generational, you know, we have such a richness to this group, new families moving in, families who have been here for a while, and then people who kind of have all the institutional knowledge and a depth of experience. And I want to say a particular thank you to our chair, Katie McGinn. The chair does put in extra work and time, and it takes extra coordination, and she's just doing a beautiful job. And so thank you, Katie. And in return, I will also say you're welcome for Kirsten, because not every committee gets Kirsten, and
We're very lucky to
it's a
have
big deal. So I mean, we couldn't have better administrative support from the town. So Kirsten, thank you, but also you're welcome. Yeah, so the impressive timeline I went through, the consultant, I hear you on that. We definitely made it, you know, very open that we want to support you all, and that seems like a, you know, a reasonable thing to ask for. But then I thought I heard a question if you want to know what we want the consultant for, and that the budget can change based on what that is. And I think what we're looking for is really come to us with some options, option 1, option 2, option 3, and we can like pick and choose or go a la carte. So, you know, and I will welcome more questions. So the town board, which I can't, you know, I can't speak for all of us. We make all the decisions together. Everything goes back to them. Everything comes, you know, nonetheless, as the liaison here tonight, and there are several, but since I'm the one here tonight, I will say that I think we are looking for you to engage the public as widely as possible, from the grocery stores, you know, situation that Katie was talking about, to the surveys. And you just can't do enough surveys. I mean, John's got a particular, I think, experience with a lot of surveys coming out from his committee, and to sessions, both educational and informational, that you were talking about. I also know and hope that you'll be open to emails and phone calls, and we're looking to be responsive to that, and to the public and the stakeholders. And then, as Mark said, responsive to change, and anticipated change that we might get from the assessment that John was talking about, and thinking about that. Yeah, and while also recognizing the change that has occurred. Like, that's a good assessment to make too. What has changed since 1985, and what is different? So I think that's, you know, we want to hear from the public, and as much of the public as possible in as many ways as possible. And we're looking for you to synthesize and organize that information and make recommendations. And then we don't even know what the makeup of the town board will be by the time, at the end of this timeline. So as you know, Charlene and John said, we certainly can't dictate whatever body is going to receive this and what they're going to do with it. So certainly make recommendations. I think it would be really helpful to have the, you know, this is what the committee considers urgent, you know, high priority, mid priority, low priority, but, you know, take with a grain of salt that, you know, once your job is done here and it's adopted, hopefully you've done your part. And I think that that's all I have to say for now. And I'm open to any questions that you may have for me. And I want to thank you tremendously. We have so much talent and experience in this group. I'm really looking forward to it. And you've come a long way in a short amount of time with this project. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments?
When we do the RFP, that's how it will be. You know, you're going to be able to contract out. We can't contract. We can't even put out the RFP. We have to give it to you. And what I think that depending on how the steering committee feels about it, that we will have different levels of what's being asked, and that will everything will have a cost attached to it, obviously. because there are also zoning amendments that that may come out as a recommendation because of that. And then going to Mark's issue, those are there. I mean, once you do the zoning, things follow. I look at it, and it's very, very heartening that everyone has such an open view of it. I look at it more as a legal land use project, and land use just as it can be used for various things, and it is a good mechanism for future goals for the whole town, but it's definitively attached to what we're doing with the land and the infrastructure. What is going to be allowed and what is not going to be allowed. So I'm just sort of saying that, my mind is opening up to actually like what infrastructure is, but the basis of a master plan is the land, how you use the land.
Yep, I agree with that. I can see that point of view. And I think that, as soon as you start to talk about legal land use and what you're going to allow and what you're not going to allow already, like the complexity of that is so rich, and you understand that. Yeah. And
I just want to add, Kirsten and I had a little bit of back and forth by email with regard to the 1999 update. And I did want to just call out a couple of things that she noted for me that I think it's important to share with the group. And it's along the subject line is like one of the recommendations was in the 1999 was that minutes from the boards and committees would be posted to the town of Louisboro website, and that the staff would use email and things like that. So there were things that were not land use necessarily related. And those are two examples of communication, things to better communicate within the community that were implemented. So I just wanted to raise that it may not all be land use that may come up as issues from the community.
That's right. Yeah. And as you say, that communication comes up over and over again. And while we're on the point of communication, the survey and getting the survey out, obviously the town is happy to lend itself to doing that. And we can help get that survey out as widely as possible, as well as any methods you feel comfortable using. But those are good examples, Larry. And so it was about using emails, and what was the other one?
Minutes of committees.
I think one thing that'll help is the town board now.
Part of the master plan, okay.
With the town board on Zoom, you have so much a broader audience than you used to in person. So just bringing it up at the town board is going to be a big boost, I think, just because you've got, used to go to a town board meeting and be 5 people there. Now you get 100 sometimes.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that many people watch this on YouTube.
Yeah. So
The same people who are coming to the town board meetings, I think, are very invested, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Look how invested people are in our community. And we'll definitely get to hear from people, and then it'll be really fun to be creative about how we hear from everybody. But I would imagine that the people who are engaged, and that's wonderful.
Any other questions for Jane or comments? Okay, well, thank you, Jane, and please extend our thanks to the other board members as well. We've really appreciated your support in getting us up and running, and your encouragement, and we're looking forward to presenting formally to the town board, and then also moving forward with the next stages of the process. That's really good point about the survey. We will definitely want to lean on any and all town resources to try to get it as widely distributed as possible. And then also in presenting the RFP to you and getting that issued and making sure that it, our goal is to present an RFP that will bring back responses that are actionable. We don't want to just draft it and then it doesn't go anywhere. So we do want it to be a menu. That way there's bits you can pick and choose for budgeting purposes, and that it's really user friendly in that respect. So we'll work on that.
Fantastic. And thank you, Charlene, for taking the lead on that. I am aware of the enormous amount of work that is.
Everybody on this committee is working really hard.
I see it. I see it. And people will see that.
Can I just drill down for a minute on the tactical way that we're going to engage community? Because we talked about this a little bit before, where we already have, I mean, maybe it's a supplement or maybe it's prior to or in parallel with a Survey Monkey. We already have in place very codified, organized committees. So I'm thinking for me, the first step or an easy step would be to reach out, whether it's via liaison or attending a meeting or having a questionnaire. But we talked about sort of having an interview, protecting 15 minutes at our next several sessions, so that we would have a one-on-one with a point of contact for emergency services, Parks and Rec, Board of Ed, because those are sort of already organized, sort of formal, and they would have their discrete, hot buttons to review with us. So are we planning to go through that list first, or how are we going to go about it?
Yeah, all right. Go ahead, Katie. Is that a question for me or for Katie?
Well, for everybody, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I didn't know if that was a question specific.
I would tell you as chairing a committee that I think if you came to a CAC meeting, talked about it, you'd get everybody in our committee to go out and try to spread the word. And, and we have a lot of committees in town. So that's a lot of different avenues to get the word out about the survey. And I think that's one of many good ways to get it out.
Yeah, the theme I want to echo in what John is saying is that I think in order to sort of to focus on equity and fairness, I think a really good first step is to get the survey out to as many people as possible, because then everyone is answering the exact same questions, using the same interface. It's really fair. I see the interviews with individual committees or stakeholders coming a little later in the process.
I really wasn't looking at it as interviews. I was looking at it as going to the committees and their members and saying, help us get the survey out.
Yeah,
exactly. And I picked up on that. I meant to echo that. Sorry, I got muddled.
But I mean, Dana has lists of people that we can use, and there's lots of places. The library has lists of people we can use.
I think we do want to have stakeholder interviews, and we do want to learn what stakeholders are looking for from the master plan further in the process. But that's different than sort of just learning about the town from a very objective perspective. Like, this is what the X committee does and how they do it. Maybe there's a role for that in the educational meetings that we're having, the educational pieces that we're putting out to the public. Food for thought there.
I think if we want to do this in a manner that will get it done quickly, but really take in everything that we need to take in, is if we really focus on the survey. John's idea of going to each committee and using as many people as we possibly can, not to get their input at that point, but to get them involved in the process. And then with the RFP, we'll then get a consultant, because remember, all this information has to be synthesized. And I know that I won't be able to do it. And then they'll give us different jobs, and that's not going to be fair and equitable. if you have someone who is managing the whole input that we need, I think it's much better. But that's how I feel. So I think that the survey and going out to getting as many people as we can to spread the word, that we can get, God willing, 11,000 people to answer it, and that would be great. That's our job right now.
You know, I think we should engage Jessica Liebman from Record Review to write an article on it. But
John, that's great.
you know, I've you know, when I've got something interesting in the CAC, I make a point to invite her and tantalize her, so she shows up, and she usually writes a pretty decent article. So,
Okay. These are all really great ideas. I want to just transition here because we're at 8:45, and I have the last 15 minutes designated for action items and follow-ups for next meeting, which will be May 4th. It sounds like we've got a couple different things in the works. So just to recap, Charlene is going to be leading the RFP draft, but she's going to be pulling us all in. I believe, now I didn't ask you this beforehand, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but Larry, do you want to take the lead on the survey?
Yeah, I had put together like just ideas. It was really like a general ideas for a survey.
Yeah, it was really great.
So I could flesh that out a little bit more with the language and this, you know, making some of those questions multiple choice and some of them open-ended, and I could recirculate that for next week if you think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and you can pull in, you don't have to do it by yourself if you want to pull in. I know in terms of making it raw data that we could put into charts and graphs, I'm not an expert on it by any means.
We could certainly, you know, we're using the Google platform, so we could certainly use Google Forms and use that to help us gather the data and manipulate it.
Cool.
So I think there's a way that we can do that. So I'll take the lead on that for sure, and I'll circulate something in between now and the next meeting.
Cool. Thank you very much. I was going to volunteer to take the lead on starting to put together a slide deck for the introductory meeting. John, do you have, we tentatively said Tuesday, June 8th for that. Do you have any conflict there?
I'll have to look.
Okay.
No, wait, CAC meetings are on Monday, so I won't have that.
Okay, well, we can come back to that, but yeah. So does somebody want to volunteer to take a look at starting to identify educational seminars? I don't know exactly how we could do this. You know, maybe webinars that are happening that are free, we could put them out to the public to invite, and then we could have a Zoom chat afterwards, or we could bring experts.
I had a suggestion on that I just wanted to, I think I might have asked about this early on, but I think you and maybe Charlene and maybe some others in the group attended the, I think it was an APA seminar on comprehensive plans. And you shared that slide deck, and you know, I wouldn't want to steal somebody else's work, but is it possible that the instructor might be available for, I assume this meeting in June would be a Zoom meeting. That's going to be an informational meeting. Is it possible that that instructor might be available if you found that informative?
We could look into it. And then I don't know if this is what you're going to say, Charlene, but quickly, I do have a item to ask you all about. We want to have Jan Johansson speak to us, but it would be broadcast via YouTube, so everyone would be able to see it. Just about what is comprehensive planning, how does it work, and then specific insight that they have to Louisboro since they've been working with us. So I think, was that what you were going to say, Charlene?
Yes, and one more thing, the census just came out.
Yeah, we should.
So Norma will have a lot of information on it.
Yeah.
I don't know whether she wants to share it publicly, however, but we can do that with an educational meeting, like, because sometimes it's raw data. I don't even know if she wants to share it with us, actually.
Right.
So, that's something that we should think of, because there's a lot of raw data out there. And maybe she has no problem sharing it, with the public. I don't know.
Okay. I do think it's time. Well, let's come back to that. So I'll look into your question, Larry, to see if somebody from APA would be willing to do some educational seminars, or we could tap into something they already have. I will, for the meeting with Jan, he's best available to us on Thursdays. So he proposed a set of Thursdays that would work for him. Do you guys, can I send that around an email? That would be, okay. So next meeting, I think it sounds like we want to touch back on the RFP and the survey and potentially content for the introductory meeting. But I think it's probably time that we could ask Norma, or we could go back to our list of guest speakers and maybe start having them slot in for part of meetings.
I'll ask her which Tuesday she would be available.
Okay, great. And I can look back at the list of the other speakers we were talking about. Any other topics that anyone wants? I didn't hear anybody volunteer for education, taking the lead on educational stuff. That's still floating out there. But any other topics that anyone wants to take the lead on or wants to make sure we discuss at the next couple meetings?
Sorry, I missed the beginning of the meeting. Did we talk about time? Did we go through the timelines or?
Yes, we did go through the timeline, and we agreed that the version that we're looking at now is a good working version. I'll make sure it's posted to Google Docs, which is with a very clear, this is the version we're working on. But it did, I incorporated your bullet points that you'd sent into that version.
Good.
Okay, well, speaking of, just because you didn't hear at the very beginning of the meeting, John, I just want to reiterate, big thank you to all the committee members. Again, we've all volunteered our time for this multi-year process, and we're all really excited about it. I know it shows because of the work that we're putting in so far, but thank you everybody for being great to work with and for all the work you've put in so far. And again, thank you to the members of the public who are watching this. If you've made it to this point, you've been with us for the whole meeting, and we appreciate that. And we're looking forward to continuing to share what we're working on with you. Our meetings going forward are going to be broadcast in this fashion via YouTube. And again, a reminder that the minutes and the agendas and associated materials will be posted to our page on the Louisboro Town website. Okay, I don't think ending a few minutes early would be such a bad thing, because we'll be back in a week. We've definitely got lots of work to do between now and then. Any quick questions or closing thoughts?
I just wanted to ask on the process of the launching the survey.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in an ideal world, it'd be nice to have the consult of the consultant review that survey. We could say, hey, what do you think of this list? Are we leaving anything out? Mm-hmm. I guess it's kind of iterative, but I think in an ideal world, I'd review that document or that whole process with a consultant, and they may advise on questions to ask or how to ask them or what system to use to collect the information.
I think that's the way a lot of towns do it. But I think we, as a committee, have sort of steered in the direction, and maybe it's a little off the beaten path, but that we want to just get that input as soon as possible. And, it's important to acknowledge that, it's not going to be all the questions that we are going to need to ask throughout the process. It certainly can't cover everything, and it might not be the exact right questions, but at least it's something to get us started.
And if the process is long enough, we could do it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. The consultant will do it again, actually.
Does anybody know if there was a survey done in 1985, or does it exist, if there was one done?
I don't recall seeing anything about that.
Yeah, the intro to the plan mentioned that there were a number of public meetings, but I don't recall it mentioning anything about a survey.
No, I vaguely remember in my history of Louisboro, since I moved here, that there have been surveys.
I can ask Ed, John.
I don't know whether they're specific to the master plan or other things, but I know the town has done surveys in the past. I'd be curious to.
In 1985 and 1999, for that matter, it was not something that you did when doing a master plan. It was a different format. I mean, now we're much more transparent. We are much more communicative.
Going back to what Mark said, we might have some very limited resources at the county level that could might be open to giving us some feedback about the initial survey. Yeah, although as we move forward and hire somebody like John and Charlene have suggested, it will be redone and another survey will go out.
This is
we can
just
take a quick look at the town. If you go to the towns that we've gotten some of the comprehensive plans, they sometimes talk about their process, so that we may find some of the towns did surveys that we could get copies of as well.
Larry did great research on that. There was some really good examples, and then I loved the documents that came out of the surveys. Like, they showed this is what the responses are and the graphs, and that was wonderful.
Every town or village does it a little bit differently. So this is not too much of an oddity. And remember, this is just the beginning to get some idea of what the public is thinking. It has nothing, it's not set in stone. It is just really an initial ask. Those things, those really deep dives will not be done without the consultant.
Yeah,
I think go ahead, John, I'm sorry.
I think the critical thing is to make the questions as objective and unbiased as possible, because I'm sure we've all seen surveys that lead you in a direction. We got to make sure we don't do that.
Right.
Okay. Well, that is all very good food for thought and marching orders. Okay. I think I'm just going to be bold and say I move to adjourn the meeting. And I encourage everybody to continue conversations via email, in the week that we have between now and the next.
Good.
Second.
All in favor?
In favor.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much. The town is really grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Kirsten.
I was muted. Good job.
Thank you. Take care.
I did have a final thought if you have a sec.
Oh, sure. We're